Welcome everybody to the game analysis of the game Nepomniachtchi against Ding Liren from the 6th round of the Candidates 2020, and that was quite an important game because it's the leader Nepomniachtchi against the number 2 in the tournament, Ding Liren. Let's get going and see how this game went. Nepomniachtchi second time in a row with the white pieces and against the second Chinese in a row after he beat Wang Hao in the last game. You may also find that game analysis on my channel. E4, E5, and we see what we have seen from Ding Liren so far in the tournament. He stays loyal to his openings, plays to Ruy Lopez once again, as he did in his previous 2 black games. D3, now a different approach. Before we had seen Rook E1 in this tournament against Ding Liren. D3 is a more calm approach, but Nepomniachtchi had something very specific in mind. This is a line that has been popular about 3-4 years ago. It was also seen in the World Championship match 2016 between Kayake and Carlsen several times, but nowadays I think the evaluation is that black is completely fine and he has different ways to continue. Bishop G4 or Knight A5 are the main moves. Knight A5, Bishop A2, and this is the way Ding has played in the past several times, as we will also see. Knight C6, Bishop goes to G5, Queen D7. Ding had this exact position just a few months ago in December 2019 against vachier-lagrave. And we follow this game for a few more moves. Knight D5, A5, and here both vachier-lagrave as well as Carlsen in the past against Ding Liren played C4, but here we see the idea. Rook B2 is the new move by Nepomniachtchi and gets Ding Liren thinking a little bit. Maybe you were still familiar with this move, but in any case, in hindsight it's always easier to say, but it might have made sense for Ding to change up his repertoire a little bit, maybe play a different move early on and not just wait and sit and wait until he gets surprised or until the opponent here, Nepomniachtchi, gets to show his preparation, which at some point inevitably will come. Rook B2, the point is to get out of the A file. Now black takes on B4, retreats with the bishop, that makes a lot of sense. C4, white has to do something right away because otherwise black will just trade the knight on D5 and the position is getting very close to equal. C4, Knight D4, so far so good. Knight takes, pawn takes, Queen C2. Nepomniachtchi still blitzing out the moves, and here and in the next moves Ding Liren plays slight inaccuracies. Rook E8 was played, better move seems to be C6, Knight F4, and now Queen goes to B7 and the position is roughly equal, but honestly, personally I would still prefer white. He has the slightly better pawn structure and also the knight finds better targets or seems to be the better minor piece in this position in many cases. Anyway, objectively close to equal. Let's see the game. Rook E8, G3. That makes a lot of sense to give the king some space just in case. No back rank mates. And the knight is also protected once it lands on F4. B takes C4. Again, there was another move here which might have been better. Rook A3. Here putting some pressure on this pawn D3. White should probably get rid of this one right away. And once again, tiny bit more comfortable, but close to equal. Let's see the game. B takes C4, Queen takes C4. C6 is very much necessary, otherwise white just picks up the pawn or cements the knight on D5 with B5. So C6, Knight F4, Bishop G5, threatening to take the knight. Knight goes back to E2. And D5, that's also very much necessary here. Pawn takes, pawn takes. The queen cannot take on D4 because there's Bishop F6 and the rook will fall on B2. So white simply retreats with the queen to B3. And here Ding quickly played H5 and that's the correct approach. I'm not sure yet whether he still had it in his preparation or whether maybe just his intuition was correct, but this is spot on. Black needs to create counterplay with the H-pawn against the white king, especially since here are the light squares pretty weakened. Now, white also has his play or his trumps in the position, especially the pawn on b5, which is a pass pawn and is running towards the promotion square. Now h4 was played, that's still fine, but maybe rook ab8 was a better choice. At some point black has to oppose this b pawn anyway. Why not do it now? b6 and now queen g4. And here we can see an advantage of moving the rook to b8. If black did it earlier, let's say here, then white could take on d5, hitting the rook on a8, and black cannot take the knight on e2. So this is why rook ab8 makes sense, and then to play queen g4. Now white could take on d5, but then the position just simplifies as black takes on e2. Let's just put it on the board real quick. Here, take. No, not take on b6, that's important. As you can see, the bar is telling us black is losing, but instead just take on d3, and that's equal. So instead, white could try in this position to play rook e1 to defend the knight, but now the queen is installed on f3 and quite unpleasant there. h4, h3, quite a serious threat. So white needs to go queen d1, h4, knight takes d4, and this is more or less a forced line here, so we can go through it pretty quickly. Bishop f6, rook b4, take. Yes, in the end, white is up a pawn in the rook endgame, but black's pieces are very active, and in the end, this should result in a draw. But here you can already see, if the best black can get is a rook endgame, a pawn down, something might have gone wrong beforehand. Anyway, this was possible. Let's see the game. h4, b6. Once again, quickly Ding Liren plays h3, but this is yet another inaccuracy. Rook ab8 should have been played here. Let's see this line, b7, rook e7, now following another approach. Queen g4, also possible move here, but let's see rook e7, rook fb1, now queen g4, queen takes d5, rook takes e2. Again, many moves have to be calculated here. Take, queen takes c3, rook c1. Looks like a very strong move, because rook c8 is a strong threat and rook takes b7 does not help. But black has an only move, which is queen a6 in this position, in this way stopping rook c8, and the best white can get is this endgame with 3 versus 2, but he probably needs to trade this queen sooner or later, and then the rook endgame will be fairly simple to hold for black. Yet again, not an easy defense. h3, king h1, and that's a very important move, because the knight is able to go to g1 and defend the important squares, as well as attack the pawn on h3. So now it's already too late to play any queen g4 or queen f5. Possible, but white simply goes knight g1. Rook b8, rook fb1, and here Ding makes a mistake, commits a mistake. Bishop d8, that's not the way to go. Rook b7 would have been better to block the pawn, knight g1 let's say, and now bishop d8. The difference is the pawn cannot advance further, but white plays queen d1, goes over to the king side, maybe wins this pawn on h3 at some point, and white is also clearly better. However, in the game, white is even winning after bishop d8. How should white proceed? Well, this pawn is attacked, so b7 is the logical and also the right move. Instead, Nepomniachtchi chose queen b5. That's a mistake. b7 should be played. Now rook a7, one option, knight f4. And maybe Nepomniachtchi was not sure about this endgame when black gives the two rooks against the queen, but it is quite promising for white because the queen cannot really get to the white king. King g1, important move by the way, to also step out of the ideas here connected to the queen getting to the dark squares and to the light squares. And now if g5, white can just take on h3, queen takes, rook takes c7, and white will win with the two rooks. So b7 was the way to go. Another line, let's see rook a5, that's also interesting. Knight g1 once again, queen b4, and we kind of get a similar position. In the end, always this pawn falls on h3, and white has the better minor piece, has the safer king, black has weaknesses. White should be able to win this position as well. So queen b5 gives black a chance to get back into the game. But Ding Liren misses it. He plays queen g4. Instead, queen f5 was the way to go. Threatening queen f3, so knight takes d4 seems more or less forced. And now queen g4 hitting the knight and cannot move because of queen f3. Let's see one possible continuation here. b7, rook a7, queen e8 check, king h7, queen takes f7. This looks strong at first because black cannot take on d4, since queen h5, king g8 and rook e2 just wins straight away for white. But instead of queen takes d4, black can go bishop f6. And I know we're far away from the game, but I want to continue this line for a little bit because it involves a very cute move. Rook b4, bishop takes d4, queen takes d5. This is a very sharp position, obviously. Now rook a5, a motive we will also see in the game in the exact same way. Point is, white cannot leave this diagonal because black is checkmating him here. That means rook takes d4 is possible or necessary also. And here, both queens are hanging. Black doesn't take anything, he just takes another one. The pawn on b7, so pretty much every single piece is hanging in this position. Study-like move here, rook takes b7, and only possible because of the weak white king. Now, white should not take this rook or this queen because of the back rank checkmate, and he should also not take the rook with his rook because of mate in 1, but instead take with the queen on b7. Now black takes on d4, white should trade the queens, and this rook endgame, white is 2 pawns up, but he will lose 1 pawn after rook a2 once again due to this annoying pawn on h3, king g1, rook e2, king f1, rook takes e4, and we yet again have the endgame 3 against 2. A little bit different because of the pawn on h3. Maybe white has some more chances here, but I think ultimately this should be also a draw. Let's get back to the game. So queen f5 was the way to go, and I'm not sure what Ding was thinking with queen g4 because white has a pretty simple and strong way to refute it. However, Nepo did not choose it. He played queen takes d5, but queen e8 is much stronger. Check and take on f7, protect the f3 square, and there's not much black can do. Let's see some lines. Rook b7, try to distract the queen once again, but white just takes on d5, rook b8, knight g1, everything's safe. Yes, black can pick up this pawn, but white will win the pawn on h3, it's 2 pawns up, it's just completely lost here. And the alternative would be maybe to take on b6, or maybe this is what Nepo did not like, bishop f6, but king g1, nothing is happening, queen f3, knight f4, all good. Maybe something like this Nepo did not like, but in the end it all works out and white wins. Also rook takes b6, winning the pawn, but f3, knight f4, the white pieces are getting active and this pawn will fall soon, this pawn might fall, the bishop doesn't have a task, white is winning. Back to the game. Nepo chose queen takes d5, which is also a winning continuation but makes the white task more difficult. Rook a5, we already saw this idea, trying to distract the queen. And here white needs to find an only move to win, which is f3. Nepo chose queen c6, a mistake. After which black can get back into a game. Let's see f3. Now the endgame is forced because after queen moves, white just takes the rook on a5. So rook takes d5, f takes g4, rook b7, blocking the pawn. And yet again, white goes after the h3 pawn. Black wins the pawn on b6, but this endgame is also very tough. The minor piece endgame would be just hopeless. The king's coming to e4 and this pawn will fall as well. So black needs to keep the rooks on the board, but I think he will also lose this game in the end. He's 1 pawn down, the knight can come to e4. Seems impossible to hold, more or less. So this was the way to go, f3. So why is queen c6 a mistake? Here, Ding Liren had a golden chance to turn this game around, or well, after a very tough game and some mistakes, he had a chance to make a draw. That's what I mean. He couldn't win this game, but he had a chance to make a draw. How? That's your task right now. Try to figure it out. It's quite tough. Ding Liren did not find it in the end, but you may as well try and calculate some variations. I hope you considered this move rook c5. If you did, well, at least you get some Ding Liren points, but it's not the right move, and after this move black is losing yet again. Rook takes b6 is the correct continuation. Rook takes, and now not bishop takes b6, which looks interesting at first because white cannot take. Queen takes we already know, and rook takes would be also a bad idea because white is checkmated on the first rank. Here we see it, queen d1. But instead white has, as so often, this intermediate move f3, and he can take in the next move. Rook a1, knight g1, everything is safe, and queen takes d3. White is coming first this time. Checkmate on b8. So bishop takes b6 is not the right continuation. Queen takes e2 instead. And I believe, or probably, Ding Liren saw it until here, and here he stopped. Rook b8, white picks up another piece, is up in exchange already. There's no mate on this diagonal, there's no mate on the first rank. So what could black do? Well, yet again, you may try, stop the video here and figure out what can black play now. Well, rook e5 is the way to go to threaten checkmate on e1, and Nepo said in the interview afterwards, if you play this move you should be disqualified for, well, engine fraud or something like this. It can be found, but you have to search for it, and Ding Liren did not search for it and he didn't find it. Rook takes d8, yes, white is up a rook, but the black counterplay with the mating threats even means that white has to tread a little bit carefully. Rook g1 looks sensible to stop queen e1, but simply queen takes f2 and rook e2 and rook e1 are the threats. White cannot do anything against it. He actually needs to give back the rook to defend himself, pick up the pawn on h3, and it would be a draw. In fact, he should do it one move earlier in this position. He should play rook h8, a little bit of a better version, but it should not change the outcome of the game. Black picks up the pawn on d3, 3 against 3, and this is equal. A golden chance for Ding Liren to save this game, but he's not in shape, and he is one of the best calculators in the world, but in this tournament he's making calculating errors again and again, and he's missing moves. So rook c5, not the way to go. Now queen e8 check, king h7, knight g1, everything is safe. White is still the pawn up, and he has a dominating position with his b pawn. Maybe Ding Liren relied on rook takes b6, but it just does not work, and actually white has two different ways to refute it. Either rook takes b6, bishop takes b6, and now the simple and calm queen takes f7, when, yet again, white has a dominating position. Not rook takes b6, by the way. This is probably what Ding Liren was hoping on. Here after rook c1, white has to trade queens because of queen f3 and rook takes g1. And this, somewhat surprisingly, is equal because the white pieces cannot leave the back rank. Once again, this pawn on h3, very strong. However, white has a better way, an easier way to do it. Queen takes d8, rook takes b2, rook takes b2, rook c1, and now also the queen trade is possible. Queen h4, takes. What's the difference? Well, black does not have a passed pawn here. Rook d1 goes after a d3 pawn, but f3 now, and here Ding resigned. And it's not premature, because after, let's say, king h6, white goes after this d4 pawn, and he will untangle sooner or later. Rook takes d3. If black plays something else like king h5, white will just go rook takes d4, rook g4, rook g3. In the worst case, he will always pick up this pawn on h3, so this doesn't help. And after rook takes d3, white can take on h3. By the way, that was the reason why Nepo played f3, so the rook does not defend the pawn on h3 anymore. Knight takes, rook takes f3, king g2, rook d3. But white has untangled, black only has one pawn for the piece, and this is just a matter of technique. And Ding did not need to see this, so he resigned after f3. Very important win, once again, for Jan Nepomniachtchi, the second win in a row against the second Chinese, with white in a row. And Ding Liren, well, you could say for one, he did not have good preparation, and for the other, he's just not calculating well. He spent time in the wrong places, and I think also on this move rook takes b6, this critical moment where he could still save the game. He had enough time to calculate the lines, but he chose the wrong move, and Jan Nepomniachtchi is the benefactor of this and is leading the tournament now with 4.5 out of 6, 1 point ahead of vachier-lagrave. What do you think of the game? Did you see the defense for Ding Liren? Post it in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do so, then you get notified when I publish new analysis. You also need to hit the bell button for that, I believe. Alright, we'll see each other very soon. Bye bye.